Welcome back, riders. Today is going to be the first video for two videos that pretty much go hand in hand. Today I will be going over my losers for 2023, and my next video, whenever that will be going through my winners for 2023. I did want to do this back-to-back days at the end of 2023. Unfortunately, I just got too busy, wasn't able to make it, so that video will be out as soon as I can get it. So, what do I consider a loser? Relatively speaking, it is something I experienced that let me down or underperformed. Maybe it was worse than I remember, things like that. It's not just strictly bad rides that I rode during the year. For example, like I knew the Vekoma SLCs at both the Wallaby parks were going to be bad, and indeed they were bad. But that doesn't really warrant a spot on this list for me. Rather, it's something that left me disappointed compared to my expectations or past experiences in some way. My list is not exclusively roller coasters, it could be literally anything, and some of them are more like jokes, kinda, and shouldn't be taken too seriously. This video is in no particular order at all, except I did save some of the biggest losers for the end. So, other than that, let's jump in. First on the list is Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm in Southern California, down near Los Angeles, Anaheim, all those places. I rode Ghost Rider for the first time in late summer 2021, and I was pretty blown away. Unfortunately, my rides I got on it this year just didn't feel the same. It didn't feel as like unhinged as my rides I got in 2021. I'm holding out some hope for some better rides in 2024. Sticking in Southern California, we got Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain, north of Los Angeles. Now, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed Wonder Woman. It's definitely still a higher ranked coaster on my list. It's not like it's bad or anything. Wonder Woman was cloned after Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure, Jackson, New Jersey, which I rode in 2021 and I was pretty impressed with. However, it was not smooth. It just felt like literally every time two track pieces met, there was just this big bump and it hurt. It wasn't the easiest to re-ride. Otherwise, I loved the ride. So I was looking forward to Wonder Woman being the same ride, but smoother. And yes, Wonder Woman was smoother, but I thought it was running much slower than Jersey Devil Coaster. And ultimately, I prefer Jersey Devil for being a much more unhinged and faster experience. Since I ended up preferring Jersey Devil, which I thought wasn't going to be the case, Wonder Woman is a loser in my eyes. Staying at Six Flags Magic Mountain for a less serious loser, but X2 had absolutely zero music for all 3 days I had at the park. I have yet to ride X2 with the onboard audio, but when I say no audio for my 3 trips to the park, I mean zero, none. The audio was not even working in the station. Like the XX22. Everybody in. Everybody in. The ceremony's about to begin. You know what I'm talking about. They didn't even have that in the station when I was there this year. That made me so upset because that always got me hyped for my past rides and everything. Ugh. I was just so mad. And then also, all 3 days I was there, it was running on one train, which stunk because even though everything was dead at the park, everything was pretty much a walk on. X2 was consistently like at least an hour all day, all 3 days, which sucked. Next is cutting Toverland on our Europe trip itinerary. This one isn't too in depth and it's not like the fault of Toverland or anything they did wrong or anything, but due to some weather, we had to shift around some of our plans while we were already in Europe, and unfortunately that came at the expense of Toverland. Hopefully one day we'll make it there. Sam's Village, west of Chicago and Illinois, is definitely a credit run. Don't get me wrong, but I was excited for the 2 flat rides. They have a inverting pendulum ride, and then they also have a Larson drop tower. Unfortunately, the Larson drop tower was standing but not operating this season, and I'm like 90% sure it's never going to open again if it's not already gone from the park. And their inverting pendulum ride was easily the worst one I've ever been on by far. So Even though I didn't have too high of expectations going into Santa's Village, I was ultimately excited for these two rides, and I didn't even get on one, and probably never will, and the other one kind of sucked, so definitely a loser. The next two are a pair of losers from Adventureland near Des Moines, Iowa, and the first is Outlaw. I was told this was like a mini GCI and a pretty solid number two coaster for Adventureland. While I agree that the layout reminds me of a GCI, it's just too tame and didn't have like any bite for me. This coaster did not really stand out in any way for me, and it didn't even end up being my number two coaster at the park. Definitely a loser. The second of the two Adventureland losers is Adventureland itself as a whole. This park has a lot of rides, and the park is pretty, like the landscaping's kept well and everything. But after Monster, there is literally nothing here I want to ride more than once or wait more than 15 minutes for. Dragon Slayer is borderline on being worth a reride or waiting more than 15 minutes for, but then you remember, or I remember, like, there's just clones everywhere, including at my home park. Lost Island is not too far north within the same state, and it's like a fourth or a third of the size of Adventureland, and they still have two standout attractions. In my eyes, Adventureland doesn't. Adventureland is literally one of the most expensive parks to visit, and I just don't see how it's worth going more than once after you get all the credits. Literally, the only reason is because Monster is absolutely fantastic. The next one also ties into Adventureland, but not entirely. My milestone coasters were a bit lackluster this year. I have done okay with this in the past. My 100th credit was Tennessee Tornado, which maybe wasn't a great one, but Lightning Rod would not open, and I already rode Thunderhead when I was looking for my 100th, so Tennessee Tornado it was. At least Tennessee Tornado is notable for being one of like Arrow's last projects, Alan Schilke, that whole shebang. My 200th coaster was Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom, obviously really great ride, and my 300th was Velocicoaster, which is absolutely elite. Everyone knows about that one. My 250th was Flying Turns, which, it's an incredibly unique coaster, and it's the only one of its kind in the world. This year, I was able to get my 350th, my 400th, and 450th milestones. My 350th was Tornado at Adventureland because I went into the day needing 2 credits for my 350th, and Monster was literally the only roller coaster open for the whole first hour the park was open. So I was pretty much forced to ride it as my 349th coaster, or I was just going to sit and do nothing for an hour while the Monster line just got super long. After that, Tornado was the next roller coaster to open at the park, so it wasn't really much of a choice. As long, if I didn't want to just sit around, I didn't really have another choice. Which I will say, Tornado's not as bad as everyone makes it out to be, but it's still boring and unremarkable. My 400th was Woodstock Express at King's Dominion, which was a result of the cards I was just dealt. It was the last available credit on my Virginia trip, so it was either go home at 399 or ride Woodstock Express for 400. At least my 450th was a little more respectable, being Baron 1898 at Efteling. It was cool that it's something from Europe, but at the same time, it's not like a super heavy hitter. It's just a small B&M dive that's themed pretty well. When I think of all the roller coasters I rode in Europe, I hardly even ever think of Baron 1898. The next two are for Universal Studios Florida, the first being Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts. I don't know what it is, but something about my last ride on Gringotts has just not been sitting well with me. It's weird because Gringotts isn't really a coaster that like runs differently. It's the same ride every single time. And beforehand, I have loved Gringotts like more than the average person. In fact, I liked it more than Revenge of the Mummy, which was a little bit of a hot take. But after my last ride on Gringotts, I was just kind of like thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, Mummy is totally better. I I just can't pinpoint what happened on my last ride, but I don't know. it's moving down in my rankings, and for that, it's a loser. Hear me out before you bash me in the comments, but the second of the two losers from Universal Studios Florida is Halloween Horror Nights. I'm not saying it's a bad event. Rather, it's just an event that I don't really care for. It's just not my thing. For years as a coaster enthusiast, going to events like Fright Fest or Halloweekends has always been more so just to go and ride roller coasters. Scare actors don't scare me, they don't really interest me. Whenever like I walk past the scare zones, I just don't have a care in the world. I just walk to whatever ride I'm going to next. I never do any of the haunted mazes or the haunts or anything like that. None of that really entertains me, and I'd rather just be riding rides. But I knew I had to try Halloween Horror Nights at least once, and I did this fall, and it was really just more the same for me. Not I just wasn't really getting scared or feeling any suspense or anything like that. If you love Halloween Horror Nights, I completely understand. It's just not my thing, but it's still a loser for me because I went into it thinking like maybe this is the grand scale and production that would finally get me to like, feel whatever there is to feel, but that just wasn't the case for me. Next is a loser from my ex home park, Six Flags St. Louis, and the fact that I did not get to ride the Boss this year. That puts me at only 3 lifetime rides on the Boss across 9 different days at the park. I have not ridden the Boss since April of 2021. I really want to ride it again because I'm still like trying to figure it out. I don't really have a verdict on the ride, but I can't get closer to a verdict if I can't ride it. It was too cold during my 2022 visits and it never opened. Well, it would open and close when I was there this year. I got in line twice and it closed on me both times. Maybe next year, but who knows. I've also been on Mr. Freeze just 4 times. I've had awful luck with Boss on Mr. Freeze at Six Flags St. Louis. At least I rode Mr. Freeze this year, so Mr. Freeze isn't a loser, but the Boss is. From my ex home park to my current home park of Six Flags Great America for my next two losers. The first being Demon. I was really looking forward to getting a ton of rides on Demon this year. Seriously, I enjoy this ride. It easily has the most charm of any coaster at the park. Wizard might have an argument for like nostalgia, but Demon has more theming. It has its own freaking theme song. I mean, come on. First Demon was the first coaster to close due to staffing, which resulted in weekend only operations once weekday operations started. And then it wasn't too long after it started opening on weekdays that it was shut down until mid October. And then I was not able to make it to the park for the rest of the season after it reopened, mostly due to the weather. So it's simply just a loser because it was hardly available this year. I rode it on 6 of my 20 visits, with 2 of those visits being back to back days, so it feels more like just 5 visits I rode it, which out of 20 is sad. The second loser from Six Flags Great America this season was American Eagle. I'm going to be blunt. American Eagle has completely lost my interest this year. I'm ready for it to go. I look at American Eagle as an opportunity for the future instead of the roller coaster it's currently operating as. I only rode it 5 times this year, and that's even when the red side, which is the better side, was running this season. I don't really understand what the park is doing. Okay, I get it, the structure can't handle dueling, I guess, so why are we alternating which side operates every year? They should just pull a Gwazi and pick one side to keep open, hopefully the red side, and close blue side for good. I don't know why they're pouring money into both sides if they're only going to run one side. I just find the ride too boring to carry on in its current form. Literally anything would be an upgrade, either upgrading it through Gravity Group Retrack or Titan Track, recommend construction, or demolish it and build the Giga, expand the park, maybe you fit 2 or 3 coasters in the land, expand Kidzopolis. That would actually be welcomed, and I wouldn't even ride anything in that. I don't know. I'm getting sidetracked, and I'm just venting at this point. But the current form of American Eagle is just not it right now. I don't know if I'm going to ride it more than twice next year on my own terms. I do just want to clarify, I do not think American Eagle is bad per se, but in a park full of quality supporting coasters top to bottom, I think American Eagle has fallen behind lately and it either has to keep up or it's just time to go. Kentucky Kingdom's Lightning Run unfortunately makes an appearance as a loser. This is most definitely a roller coaster that is fantastic, but my two rides this year just felt so sluggish and underwhelming. It took a step back in my rankings. So, in a past video, I stated that I thought the B&M Loser was a bit of a loser for me this year. I partially take that back. Going through my coasters this year, I actually thought 4 B&M Hypers were winners, so I decided to split the winners into the winners video and the losers into the losers video, and take back my general statement that B&M Hypers collectively were a loser this year because it was really just three of them. Behemoth and Diamondback, they just don't have a ton of variety. Don't get me wrong. I didn't really move them down my B&M Hyper rankings as they went from my first and second favorite B&M Hypers, and then they moved down to just my second and third. Just in terms of like ranking all my roller coasters, they took a bigger hit and they moved behind various coasters like a good chunk of RMCs and top tier Intamins. Mako was the third. It took a hit because I just felt like it ran sluggish this year when I rode it, both in September and November. The airtime was not as strong, and the second half had like no bite. Next is Slinky Dog Dash at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Florida. Listen, I knew Slinky Dog Dash was not going to be a thrilling ride, but man, I just did not feel an ounce of any force on this ride. And I thought the theming was a bit below average for a Disney ride. This coaster pulls some crazy lines and it's just not worth it. Like, at least I want to go on Seven Dwarfs Mine Train every now and then. I genuinely have no interest on getting back on Slinky Dog Dash. You're gonna have to drag me on. Grizzly at California's Great America is a coaster I didn't really have expectations with, but wow, this ride is literally the most boring coaster I have ever been on, as long as it's not a kiddie coaster. This coaster does absolutely nothing. Oh my, ugh. I literally have Lucy's Krabby Cabbies ranked over Grizzly, like with confidence. That is how boring Grizzly is. We have 5 losers left in the video, and moving forward from this part of the video, this is where I saved the biggest losers for last. These 5 in particular aren't really, and they're not like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but these are the top 5. Going into the year, I had never ridden Space Mountain at Disneyland, and I had not been on Space Mountain at Disney World since 2013. I rode Space Mountain at Disneyland in March, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it made me excited to get on Space Mountain at Disney World. I rode both sides of Space Mountain at Disney World in September, and wow, I was thoroughly disappointed. I guess I could have known this had I done some research, but unlike the Disneyland version, the Disney World version has no onboard audio, which was really upsetting to me. Disney World's version is jerky, which I can overlook if it has other positive qualities, but I just couldn't find them. People told me there's airtime, but I got none. My rides weren't even into pitch black. It was just such a letdown for me. During my second ride, my Magic Band, which I literally just bought 3 hours beforehand, went flying off during this like jerky moment and my wrist hit the restraint. So yeah, I'm just not happy with Space Mountain at Disney World. I have them ranked as my least favorite coasters at the park, excluding Barnstormer. That's how, ugh, not too happy. Next up is Psyche Underground at Walibi, Belgium. Standing on its own, this is actually a pretty solid coaster. It's completely indoors, it's got good theming, it's got a cool music soundtrack. The problem with Psyche Underground is when you compare it to like a standard Schwarzkopf shuttle loop. I've only been on one, Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm. Rest in peace. Hopefully not. That ride is freaking awesome, and I loved Montezuma's Revenge. So when you compare Montezuma's Revenge and Psyche Underground, Psyche Underground got this big refurbishment renovation, And it's like Psyche Underground got this like absolutely ridiculous hard nerf. Besides the theming, I think Gerstlauer pretty much ruined this coaster with the renovation. It has no bite, no airtime. It was so disappointing. At least it wasn't my 800th roller coaster. McLovin. 2023 marked my return to Six Flags Over Georgia. When I went in 2014 and 2016, I really liked the park overall. This year, though, I walked away with a different taste in my mouth. Let's get this out of the way. Yes, the lineup here is pretty good. I thought that during my prior visits, and I still believe that after this year. They don't have any bad coasters, everything is good quality. But the operations took a big hit. I went on Memorial Day weekend and they were only running one train on their signature attraction, Goliath. Under no circumstance should you be running one train on Memorial Day weekend. Full disclosure, yes, the second train had not been running for at least a few weeks beforehand, maybe a couple months, but I don't care what it takes. You have to have the second train ready to go on Memorial Day. Expedite the order part, put in overtime, I don't care. It has to be done. If you have to run one train on a hyper coaster, you at least have to have a good crew pumping out trains, and they did not. The operators were lazy and they had no care towards throughput. After all that, though, the one thing they did care about, though, was stapling, of course. Just not a good experience. Stapling was a park-wide thing, though, not just Goliath. Twisted Cyclone was extremely staple happy alongside other coasters. Superman was running one train when they have three trains and two loading platforms. One train. Memorial Day weekend. This is just not acceptable. If you have three trains, you have to be running at least two at all times. No exceptions. I'm sorry. But yet they went ahead. They ran one train on Memorial Day weekend. Just unacceptable. Leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And then there was a whole fiasco when I tried to buy a Flash Pass. With my Legacy membership, I get a free upgrade in my tier of Flash Pass whenever I buy one. So I go from like the bronze to silver or silver to gold. I know they're not called that, but I did this at Six Flags Magic Mountain 2 months prior with no issues, but when I tried to do it at Six Flags Over Georgia, they acted like I was crazy. They sent me back and forth between Flash Pass Center and guest relations. They were just pointing fingers at each other, and it took 90 minutes of my day in the morning just to get what I was entitled to. I will give credit to the people at the Flash Pass Center for being patient with me and being willing to work with me, but neither FlashPass or guest services knew their own product, and guest services were just straight up mean to me when they were entirely in the wrong. Also, as a cherry on top, I had a nightmare attempting to get food at JB's Barbecue. I also had a awful time trying to get on Daredevil Dive. I've gone on long enough. I love the lineup here. I love all the trees and the hills, and I do like this park, but I hope by the time I return that everything else operations wise and running the park wise is just up to par. My last two entries were pretty easily my biggest losers of the year. The first we will go over is my trip to Northern California. If you watched my video where I ranked every park I went to for the first time this year, you might remember that I ran into some really gloomy weather when I was in Northern California. I was not impressed with how the parks were operated. It's like they took the easy way out and just called its quits early. Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk has three roller coasters and only one was open when I was there. At least it was Giant Dipper. California's Great America has nine roller coasters and only six were open, as I missed Woodstock Express, Demon, and most notably Railblazer. Worst of all, though, was Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, as they have 10 roller coasters and I only rode three: Medusa, Batman, and Boomerang. I missed out on everything else, notably Superman, Flash, and the Joker. So, in total, I only got 10 credits out of 22 across the three parks I went to. Let me read that again. 10 out of 22. I got on neither of the RMCs, and seriously, it was just a light drizzle at worst. It like yes, very gloomy and everything, but like oh, Northern California is so far away from me. I finally made it up there and I didn't even get half the credits. And I missed two of their top three coasters. Big L. Now we come to the biggest loser for an individual roller coaster, Untamed at Wallaby Holland. This coaster had so much hype, and I was expecting it to make my top 25 coasters with ease. And the sad part is, after all this, I still think it could rank that high, but unfortunately, Untamed was nowhere near warmed up when we rode. We had planned a full day at the park, but there ended up being a tropical storm on that day, and the park did not run anything besides the indoor madhouse before closing for the day an hour after the park opened. So obviously we wanted to ride all the coasters at Wallaby Holland, so that is where we cut Toverland and decided to spend the first half of the next day at Wallaby Holland. So combined with not running at all the day prior, plus only have ran for maybe 3 to 4 hours when we were there for our last ride, it just felt so sluggish. It was just so, I don't want to say meandering, but like, wow, it had no aggression or anything. I have Untamed ranked as my least favorite Rocky Mountain construction coaster by a wide margin. Untamed is ranked 175th overall, while my second least favorite Rocky Mountain construction, Wonder Woman Golden Lasso, that was in the video earlier, is ranked almost 100 spots higher at number 81. That's how poor I thought Untamed was running. It was more of a result of unfortunate circumstances, but still, it has to be one of, if not the biggest loser for me this year. So that is all I have for today's video. What rides or parks let you down this year? Let me know in the comments below. My next coaster will be all my winners from 2023, and just a heads up, it's going to be a much longer video, even longer than this one. It's going to make up for all my negativity today, so I hope to see you there. Push down, pull up, exit to the right. Hope you enjoyed the video, and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo, bye.